I guess this is the episode where we'll take a look at Martin's beer of choice, Ballantine. Hello, and welcome to the 15th installment of Frasier Fridays, where all the salads are tossed and all the eggs are scrambled. Today, we're looking at episode 15, entitled You Can't Tell a Crook by His Cover. This is the longest titled episode of the season, and the last one to air in January, premiering on January 27th, 1994. It attracted 27.8 million viewers, a nice climb of 600K from the previous week. And it seems, post-Thanksgiving break, Frasier has found a new bottom level in the ratings. Seinfeld is off again this week, so still no comparison there. Next week, both Seinfeld and Lilith come back, so I'm very excited to see what the rating race brings then. You Can't Tell a Crook by His Cover is an Andy Ackerman directed episode, and it is written by David Lloyd. This is the first episode Lloyd has written, but not the first episode written by a member of his family. Episodes 4 and 12 were both written by his son, Christopher Lloyd. This is the first of 16 episodes the elder Lloyd will write, and a very enjoyable outing. Despite this being his first outing on Frasier, Lloyd is far from a newcomer to the Cheers universe. He wrote 11 episodes of Wings and 25 episodes of Cheers, including the episode where Rebecca's sister came to visit, which was one of my favorites of that season. Prior to his death in 2009, Lloyd was a comedy writing mainstay in Hollywood. Starting in 1962, he began writing for The Tonight Show. He wrote jokes for nearly 150 episodes of the late night program, and actually started before Johnny Carson was even the regular host. Lloyd continued to contribute to late night shows for most of the 60s and into the 70s, before he moved into writing sitcoms. He's written numerous episodes of The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, The Betty White Show, and the 1984 Showtime series Brothers, which Lloyd was the creator of and ran for 5 seasons. Lloyd won 3 Primetime Emmys and numerous nominations. 2 of his Emmy wins were for The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and one of them is for a later season episode of Frasier. Our next David Lloyd episode will be partway through season 2. We're on production code 116 this week. Production code 115 will show up as episode 17, and then we'll be back on track for 2 episodes before we bounce around a bit at the end of the season. This week opens with the red blinking dot on top of the Space Needle. This is the second week in a row we've had this opening, a first for the series, and it makes the red dot blinking easily our most common intro, appearing so far 5 out of 15 episodes. This episode starts with Martin showing up at the KACL station for the first time, and the Frasier and Bulldog posters have returned to the studio hallways. Martin even goes so far as to comment on them. Martin's actions in the radio station are fantastic, and he genuinely reminds me of some people I've worked with in the past. He starts just touching everything in sight, despite not having any idea what it does. I've worked with people that did the exact same thing. So this really cracked me up, and it's one of those nice moments that felt super real to life. This episode has one of the lightest Roz appearances to date. She's only in half of the opening scene, and kind of takes the place of the guest caller to propel us further into the week's plotline. Roz gets scammed out of $10 in the parking lot outside the KACL studio. I'm guessing we're never going to see Harry the Hat on Frasier, but this made me think of him. The scam artist from Cheers didn't always work for me, but when he did, his scams were pretty good. Bringing a scam artist into Frasier, though not a callback to this character, is a nice parallel to Frasier's time on Cheers. The pace of this episode is kind of strange. It's almost 2 stories instead of 1. The first being Frasier's attempt to be a Hercule Poirot, as he tries to determine which of Martin's friends is an ex-con. and the second half being Daphne's date with said ex-con. During the first half, we meet Martin's three poker friends, Frank, Linda, and Jimmy. Frank is played by Ron Dean. Dean is a "that guy who was in that thing" actor, and an interesting one at that. We've seen guest stars before who, for whatever reason, gravitated towards certain types of roles. For Dean's part, that role is the Chicago cop. In fact, Dean actually holds the record for appearing the most times as a Chicago cop while never having a regular role as one. He's been in a ton of movies and television shows, including Risky Business, The Breakfast Club, The Fugitive, and ER. He appeared in 17 episodes of The Early Edition and 9 episodes of the 1986 drama Crime Story. He'll return to this role on Frasier 2 more times, which is a nice bit of continuity for Martin's character. Linda is played by Catherine McGrath. McGrath isn't much known as a television actor, and only has a handful of TV roles to her name, including playing Sam's cleaning lady in an episode of Cheers, and appearing in an episode of General Hospital and Hill Street Blues. She spent most of her career as a stage actress. She started out performing in regional shows, mostly in Massachusetts and London, throughout the 1970s and the 1980s. Then, in the 90s, she spent a lot of her time on television, and in the 2000s, she made the jump to Broadway. This is her only appearance on Frasier. Martin's final friend, Jimmy, the ex-con, is played by Tony Abedmarco. Abedmarco has been very active since he made his first on-screen appearance in a 1983 episode of One Day at a Time. From there, he's gone on to appear in small guest spots regularly, including an episode of The Tortellis, Tales from the Crypt, Dragnet, Babylon 5, and ER. Since around 2000, he's gone from doing smaller parts in TV shows to movies, and post-2011, he's appeared in a number of shorts. Since he actually calls it out by name, I guess this is the episode where we'll take a look at Martin's beer of choice, Ballantine. Ballantine was founded by a Scottish immigrant in Newark, New Jersey in 1840. By 1880, it was the 6th largest brewery in the United States, nearly double the size of Anheuser-Busch. Prohibition hit Ballantine hard, and by the time it ended, the family decided to sell the company. For the next 30 years, Ballantine did all right, but by the 1960s, they saw a rapid decline in sales, forcing the current owners to sell to the Falstaff Brewing Company in 1972. Falstaff didn't handle the brand well at all, and in 1985, they sold the floundering brand to Pabst. Throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, Pabst continued to produce Ballantine beer, although they switched the recipe several times. Both Hunter S. Thompson and Ernest Hemingway were fans of Ballantine beer. Given these endorsements, it's a little surprising Frasier doesn't drink it more often with his father. Frank is revealed to have a hobby as a fine china connoisseur, and asks Frasier if his bowl is a lalique or a Steuben. Like with many of Frasier's hobbies, I don't know a lot about fine china, but from what I can tell, I believe this bowl to be a Steuben, although I couldn't find any exact versions of it. I saw a number of Steubens with similar rounded bases, while lalique tends to have more decorative bases for their bowls. Assuming this is a Steuben, it's kind of an interesting piece. Steubens are part of the Corning Glass Company from Corning, New York. They also make the Corningware baking dishes that everyone and their mother has at least a few of. Steubens are best known for being a crystal clear glass, and are available in only 4 retail locations: the Glass Museum in Corning, New York, a store in Beverly Hills, one in West Hartford, Connecticut, and one in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. Today, a bowl like Frasier's would probably cost somewhere between $500 and $2,000. At the end of the parlor scene, where Frasier reveals who the ex-con is, after guessing incorrectly twice, we get kind of a ridiculous scene, where Frasier and Martin both try to protect Daphne from going out with Jimmy. Martin feeling paternal for Daphne makes a lot of sense, especially given their relationship, but Frasier's paternal feelings don't. especially given there's not really much of an age difference between them. This makes the scene all the funnier. We finally make the return to Cafe Nervosa this episode after a far too long hiatus. This is the first time we've seen the cafe since episode 10. And we get to see Dean Erickson working as a waiter again. This is his third appearance as a waiter, and he'll show up one more time in episode 17, where he actually has a name. We'll talk more about him then. During this scene, we also get to see the Cafe Nervosa sign and logo. I don't think anyone's actually said the cafe's name out loud yet, but it's good to see it is clearly established with a name at this point in time. There's one other thing I wanted to point out during this scene. Niles takes a moment to pull out a handkerchief and wipe the seat off before he sits down. Even in a fairly upscale establishment, Niles is still worried enough about other people's dirt that he takes the time to wipe off the chair. I don't know if this is something that was in the script or just something David Hyde Pierce did, but either way, it's a perfect Nilesism for this scene. And that's not the only great Nilesism here. After not getting to see Niles' reaction to Daphne going out with Bulldog last week, we get to see him freak out over her going out with an ex-con, and it's every bit as good as I hoped it would be. We get one particularly funny line where he asks Frasier if he's just, quote, yanking my giggle chain. I have never heard this expression before, and it's the perfect mix of being simultaneously childish and thoughtful to leave me really cracking up. We move into our final scene of the episode at the Topaz Room, which is really just a shoddy-looking bar full of rougher types and Daphne, who turns out to be the best con man of the episode. I like Daphne being a pool shark, and I find this totally fits in with what we've seen from her character before. We find her betting against a man named Leo after her date apparently ditched her. Leo is played by Marco Rodriguez, and the man has been in a ton of things. Starting in 1980 with an appearance in Knots Landing, Rodriguez has appeared in dozens of television shows and movies. He has over 130 credits to his name. He's been in a huge range of programs, ranging from Cagney and Lacey, to Days of Our Lives, to Walker, Texas Ranger, to The Crow. And that was all before he did this episode. Since then, he's done just as many varied spots, including ER, Seinfeld, The Fast and the Furious, Sliders, and the excellent Jake Gyllenhaal film Nightcrawler. The guy is still active today, having appeared most recently on a March episode of The Rookie Feds. Looking at the vast number of performances Rodriguez has had, it's cool Frasier is part of them, but it would have been even cooler to get a little more out of him this episode. The huge bartender Niles is afraid of is played by Ivory Ocean. Ocean is another actor who's done a lot of Frasier-related shows we've seen other actors come from, including The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, The Young and the Restless, Seinfeld, ER, and Sliders. He also appeared in the truly awful Leprechaun 5 in the Hood, which is even worse than its sequel, Leprechaun 6, Back to the Hood. Rocco, the man Frasier bumps into and ruins his shot, is played by Robert Miano. If I thought Rodriguez had an impressive resume, Miano's is insane. The man has been active since the early 70s and has nearly 300 credits to his name. A few of the standouts are The Hardy Boys' Nancy Drew Mysteries, Cagney and Lacey, General Hospital, Walker, Texas Ranger, The Young and the Restless, and Fast and Furious, which I believe is the fourth one. As of this recording, Miano also has another 31 projects in production. Once all of those are out, the man will be at over 300 credits, and unless I'm mistaken, by far the most credited actor to appear on Frasier thus far. As Daphne is gambling to keep the boys out of trouble, we get some truly excellent reaction shots from Frasier and Niles once each ball is hit. I'm sure we've seen something like this from Ackerman before, but I'm not sure I can pinpoint when. Either way, it's very effective. Both Frasier and Niles' reactions are fantastic, and it's one of the highlights of the episode. I'm not sure if this says more about me or about Lloyd's writing, but from the second Martin mentioned giving Eddie a bath, I was expecting the coda scene would involve our favorite four-legged actor getting clean. Granted, I was envisioning a wet Eddie running through Frasier's apartment, soaking everything, but Daphne trying to lure him in with treats works just as well. This episode is tied with episode 12 for the least ties of an episode. Like that episode, each brother only sports one tie. Both ties this week are repeats. This is the second time Frasier has worn this tie. The last time was in episode 10. And Niles' tie has been seen in episode 5 and episode 13. This is only the second time in the series no one has worn a new tie. The last time being episode 13. It looks like we're going to have to wait until next week to see tie number 42. Ackerman has some great camera tricks this episode, especially during the pool hustling scene. And I found myself grinning from ear to ear with Frasier and Niles' reactions. Although I've enjoyed both episodes the younger Lloyd has written thus far, I can't help but feel the senior Lloyd turns in the strongest script of the three thus far. Daphne and Martin both have some excellent lines and character moments. And Niles proclaiming Frasier is yanking his giggle chain was unexpected yet perfectly in character for the younger Crane brother. We also got the great visual gag of Niles wiping off the cafe seat before sitting down. We learn Daphne is 5'9" in this episode, which is also Jane Levy's actual height, making her much taller than I would have guessed. And we get a wide variety of excellent and accomplished guest stars. Really, the only weakness in this episode is it's very Roz light. And the plotline feels a little disjointed, being divided into basically two different storylines. The whodunit bet between Frasier and Martin, and Daphne's date. These minor quibbles aside, this is another excellent episode. Join Frasier as he, unsuccessfully, tries to pick a con, any con, on this 9 out of 10 episode of Frasier.